Hi everyone. Today I'd like to introduce to you end-to-end testing with Maestro. So first a bit about me. Hi, I'm Miko. I'm a React Native developer at Iterators. I've been working with React Native about on and off for like 2 years. I do have some previous QA experience as well, so I have been writing some end-to-end tests. I know a bit about what I'm talking about, basically. So what are we going to go through? First we'll go through what is Maestro, just in general, why you should consider it, what sets it apart, how does it work, so how are test cases separated into flows and stuff like that, go through some basic syntax, and then we'll go through a quick example of running a test on the iOS Contacts app, just creating a contact, changing some stuff with that contact. Then we'll go through some advanced features such as JavaScript extensibility, a bit about Maestro versus Detox, the other end-to-end testing library in React Native, a bit about why not Maestro maybe, because it's always good to have a list of cons, and then we'll conclude. So to begin with, what is Maestro? Maestro is self-described as the simplest and most effective mobile UI testing framework. Does that hold up? Yeah, I think it holds up. It's really easy and nice to use. It supports Android and iOS apps written in React Native, but not only, because it also supports Flutter, native apps, and using web views, etc. It's really for everything. And you can think of it as a modern Appium or Detox alternative. So, why Maestro? First of all, because of its tolerance to flakiness. Maestro understands that UI elements aren't always where you expect them to be. Screen taps won't always go through. And it handles that under the hood, at least as best as it can. It's delay tolerance, which means that you don't need to litter your code with sleep calls. Maestro understands that certain interactions take a specific amount of time, and knows that perhaps you don't need to be sleeping exactly 400 milliseconds in order for an interaction to complete. It does that all under the hood. If you do need a sleep call, Maestro obviously provides for that. For example, if you need to wait for a video to stop playing, you can do that. Because it's interpreted, which makes development of tests way faster. You can skip the compilation step, obviously, but also because it exposes continuous mode. A mode of running tests in Maestro, where if Maestro detects a change in the test file, it will automatically restart the test that's running. Because it's simple, the syntax is really simple and straightforward and stored in YAML. You'll see later in a comparison to Detox just how nice it is. It's obviously cross-platform, as I mentioned before, iOS, Android, React Native, Flutter, etc. And because of, in my opinion, a really amazing GUI client, Maestro Studio, that speeds up development time of tests extremely well. But we'll go into details with that later. So, how does Maestro work? Maestro test cases are separated into so-called flows. So a flow is a series of commands describing interactions or assertions. So you can tell it, for example, here, to launch an app, then tap on a specific button, assert that something is visible, yada yada. How do you actually run these tests? Using, in the command line, Maestro test. You supply the file name afterwards, or with the -c flag, you can run it in continuous mode, which I mentioned earlier. Additionally, you can also run a whole test suite, so a subdirectory of test flows, just by supplying it with the subdirectory name. So we'll go through a quick example. I'll just show a video of the test running, and then later we'll analyze it step by step with what's happening. Okay, so here we've launched the app, and now we're going to press add to add a new contact. Once we've done this, we select the first name field, and we input a random first name. We tap the company field, we input Iterators as the company. Email, add in a random email. Next, we're changing the ringtone of this contact. And finally, we're going to change the profile picture of the contact. Once all of this is done, we have our newly added contact ready and created. So let's actually go through what's happening here in the YAML file. So on the left, you'll have the test flow, and on the right, there's going to be a screenshot of what's happening in the simulator at the moment. So we can see that before our flow even starts, we first mention what the app ID is. So we just mentioned that it's the iOS Contacts app in this case. Next, we launch the app, but with the clear state flag. This makes it so that app state is consistent in between tests. because stuff such as navigation state is all cleared. So now if we want to tap on the plus button, all we have to do is tap on add. Obviously, there's no actual add text underneath this icon. However, what Maestro does is it detects the test IDs or accessibility labels that are underneath the app, and it uses them to select the specific components. So in this case, the test ID of this plus icon is add. So we simply specify that to press it. Next, we input the first name. So we first click on first name, which was that field that was available. And then we use one of Maestro's nice built-in utility methods, insert random person name. This just inputs a random first and last name. There's others such as input email, input number, and input text. We'll see one of them later. Next, we tap on the company name, and we input a specific string. So in this case, we just supply input text with a specific string iterators. Finally, we tap on insert add email, and here again you can see that this text does not actually appear anywhere on the screen. Again, it's a test ID. So we're pressing this green button so that we can add in a new email and use our utility function input random email to input a random email. Finally, if we want to change the ringtone, we want to select this arrow that's available next to the ringtone. It's not exactly enough for us to simply specify the text forward. We also need to specify the index in this case, because if you can see, there is another arrow next to the home email field. So here we select that it's the second one. Next, we select on the ringtone that we want to change, in this case apex, and then we have our first assertion. So we're making sure that something is true. In this case, we're asserting that this selected checkmark is visible on the screen. Obviously, this maybe isn't the best assertion because it was visible on the previous screen as well, but just as an example of how it works, it's fine. Once we're done with that, we press done. And at this point, we want to change the profile picture. To do this, we press the add photo button. And again, we're supplying it with an index because, fun fact, in the iOS Contacts app, the little circle with the profile picture also has a test ID of add photo. And at this point, we want to select a new profile picture. And what we do is we specify a specific point on the screen that we want to tap. So here we're specifying 38% width, 79% height. So instead of selecting it by text, you can also just do it manually like this. And once we're done with that, we just press done a couple of times. And we're done. We have our newly created contact. So obviously, this is quite a simple example. You could extend it with many more assertions and many more interactions, make it more complicated. But as a simple showcase of what you can do and how easy it is to do in Maestro, I think that's quite fine. We will go through more advanced features now. So we'll start off with nested flows. In Maestro, you can nest your flows so that you can avoid code reuse and make code easier to maintain simply by putting it into separate files. So if we want to, for example, test something on the profile page and on the settings page, before both of those can be tested, we need to log in. We do that by simply having a separate test flow log in, and then we run it using run flow in the profile and settings tests. Loops, obviously, this is quite simple. You can just repeat a couple of steps a number of times, but it's quite nice, for example, when you want to be creating 3 contacts and then creating relations between them, such as is mother of or is daughter of. And then another powerful feature is passing in parameters and constants. So to pass in parameters, you simply, on the command line, using the -e flag, supply what the parameter should be, and then you can reference it in your test flow with this JavaScript string interpolation syntax. So username and password in this example. Constants are very similar, except that we define them before our flow starts in this environment variables section, basically. And again, we're referencing them in the same way that we would do with parameters. But perhaps the most powerful feature of Maestro is its JavaScript extensibility. You can evaluate JavaScript inline using, again, this curly brackets syntax, or you can run external JavaScript files. So here, for example, we're inputting at the beginning 1 + 1 evaluates to 2, hello plus my name evaluates to hello John, etc. And Maestro will work with that, just as you would normally write it. We can run an external JavaScript file using run script and then supplying it with the external file name. And we can also evaluate just inline using eval script. And as you can see here, we have a special variable called output. This is a globally defined JavaScript object that every JavaScript piece of code that's running from this flow has access to, can modify and can reference, can get the value of. So in this case, in eval script, we're setting the value of output.results to something, and then later we're referencing it in our input text. So those are some of the more advanced features of Maestro, but there are a couple of additional tools that Maestro comes shipped with that make it one of the most powerful end-to-end testing libraries. First of all is the GUI client that I mentioned earlier, Maestro Studio. In order to run it, you simply run Maestro Studio in your command line, and at that point, a web server will start running with Maestro Studio on it. It connects to a locally running simulator or emulator, and it mirrors its screen onto Maestro Studio. From this point, you can hover over any element that's available on this mirrored screen, and Maestro Studio will tell you how to reference that element by what ID, or perhaps what index it needs to have, like I mentioned earlier when you have two elements that have the same test ID. And it provides you a list of examples on what you can do with this element, what assertions you can make, or tapping on it, interacting with it, etc. And the nice thing about these examples is that you can click on any of them, it'll copy it to your clipboard, at which point you can simply paste it into your test flow, making development of tests really easy, straightforward, and intuitive. The next feature that Maestro comes with is Maestro Record. Perhaps you're wondering, how did I get that recording of the test flow being run? It looks really nice and everything. It's with Maestro Record. Basically, it captures app screen recording and flow output, stitches them together, provides you with a download link to an MP4 file of the test running. Now, this is useful in a couple of different scenarios. First of all, if you're giving a talk about Maestro at React Native Warsaw, it's very nice in that case. Or if, for example, you want to show in the comment of a Jira task why a certain test case is failing, you can simply upload the video of the test failing. Additionally, you can also integrate it with your CI, which we'll get to in a bit. But if you have Maestro running in the cloud, for example, and in your continuous integration, you can check why a certain merge, for example, failed, and have a video of it happening, as well as step-by-step instructions on how to replicate that issue. It's really quite great. So that takes us to CI and Maestro Cloud. This basically is a cloud service provided by Maestro that lets you test using Maestro on the cloud. All you have to do is upload your app bundle and your test flow, select what simulator or emulator you want it to run on, and Maestro Cloud will do that for you. So it makes CI integration really quite easy. Okay, so Maestro is great and all, but how does it compare to Detox, which we love, or hate, perhaps? So between the two, they're obviously end-to-end testing frameworks, so they're quite similar. Whatever you can do in one, you can basically do in the other, but there are some differences. So when it comes to supported frameworks, while Detox is a strictly React Native testing framework, Maestro will work on pretty much anything, which makes it a lot more versatile. In terms of language, while Maestro is mainly written in that YAML, as I said, plus the extensible JavaScript, Detox is strictly JavaScript. In terms of execution, while Maestro is interpreted, Detox is compiled, which gives Maestro maybe a certain edge when it comes to development time of tests, making it just simpler and easier. Here's a quick comparison of the same test flow written in Maestro and in Detox. So as you can see here, there's a lot less fluff in Maestro. What looks like a really complicated test on the right can be summed down to clicking on an email, inputting something in it, password, inputting something in it, and logging in. In Maestro, all you have to do is focus on the interactions that are happening instead of trying to write a program. So Maestro is great and all, but why should we not choose it? I ran into some issues with Maestro, and perhaps you will too if you decide to use it. First of all, it doesn't support real iOS devices, though this is also the case with Detox. If you really do need to test something that's not available on the simulator, such as camera usage, you should probably stick to something like Appium, which does support it. I also had some problems scrolling on iOS for some reason, and to be honest, I couldn't really find much support for it. I couldn't find anything on Stack Overflow or GitHub issues. However, later I heard that there is quite an active Slack community for Maestro, so perhaps I should have asked my question there and gotten some more support. But that takes us to our final step, or thing. It's new. Maestro's new. It came out not that long ago, so there isn't much of a community built up around it as much as there is with Detox. So obviously, should you switch your entire stack of an extremely complicated app to Maestro? Maybe. It's hard to say. In a couple of years, I'd be able to give you a really straightforward answer on what you should choose, but right now it's still not battle tested. We don't know. So, to wrap up, Maestro is a modern end-to-end testing framework that I think you should try because of its amazing developer experience. Its fault and delay tolerance make it so that tests simply include what you're interacting with, instead of all the other unnecessary fluff. It's simple, it's easy to learn, you'll get up and running within 10 minutes at most. And finally, because of what I think is one of the best parts of Maestro, is the GUI client that makes writing tests extremely simple, fast, and just a pleasure to use in general. And so if there are any questions, I'll happily answer them. If not, you can also contact me here, and I'll happily answer you then. Thank you.
Thank you.